Welcome to Public Affairs Roundtable, a discussion of current events in the nation and around the world and how they affect the people of Indiana. Here's your moderator, Larry Law.
In conjunction with the annual Law Day activities here at Ball State University, this Public Affairs Roundtable program will continue a tradition. In past years, Law Day programs have included a review of the activities of the Indiana General Assembly. Today we'll maintain that tradition with three members of the General Assembly. They are House Speaker J. Roberts Daly, a Republican from Muncie, Representative Hurley Goodall, a Democrat from Muncie, and Senator William McCarty, a Democrat from Anderson. Gentlemen, was this a productive session? Are there things that we're going to put in the history books about the 1986 session of the Indiana General Assembly that are going to mark this as something special? Speaker Daly?
Oh, I think it was maybe the most remarkable session that I have seen in the 10 years I've been in the General Assembly for getting substantive things done. I think most people said ahead of the session that you don't get much done in a short session, but when you do look at some of the issues that were at least addressed and something done, maybe not the final say, but something done, then I think we did accomplish a lot.
You agree, Senator McCarty?
I think for a short session that there were many things accomplished, and not having a lot of budget issues probably helped do that we were able to focus on poor relief to some extent, to license branch reform, the lottery issue, and focused on the issue of appointing versus elective superintendent. Some people don't like the outcome on that particular issue, but there was a lot of focus on it. So yes, I think there were a lot of issues that, for a short session, that we did deal with.
Because there were some pretty substantial issues, if you've mentioned here in this short session, is this an argument for perhaps extending sessions to perhaps 90-day sessions each year, or a full-time legislature? Are we moving in that direction? Representative Goodall?
No, I think this session proved that the legislature reacts to issues when they need to be discussed and dealt with. And I don't care how long we stay there, we aren't going to deal with the issues until the last few days of the session. And whatever has to be done and whatever the public's demanding to be done, the legislature usually responds. That's been my experience.
That's just human nature, Larry. People tend to put off making final decisions until they're really forced to do so, and it's no different in the legislature. And Hurley's absolutely right. We could extend it to 180 days, and we wouldn't get things done. You look at the history of the other states, the way they operate, and they're in much longer. They don't get any more done than we do. And they wait till the last minute to do it.
I would even be sympathetic to shortening both sessions a few days. If we're going to go any direction, let's shorten it up 5 days.
Move up the deadline.
Sure, and we'll respond. One other thing I'd like to see the Senate do is to put a limit on the number of bills that each individual senator files. There's no limit, so 50 senators manage to file as many bills as 100 House members.
More.
Or more. And if we could reduce the number of bills we file, then we could focus on the principal issues even more.
Well, a lot of the legislation that's filed in the Senate is redundant to things filed in the House or by the senators. Is that?
Well, I would say that some of the stuff filed in the House might be redundant, but
the House is not necessarily redundant. It's just repetitive.
It's the same stuff filed in both chambers. And we could reduce a little bit of that, and if we had a limit, say 5 bills, on how much each senator could file, then you'd force the senator to make his priorities, establish some priorities about what he felt were the 5 most important things that he wanted to see dealt with. Instead, you may get a senator filing 10 or 12 or 15 pieces of legislation.
The legislature did deal with license branch, well, I'll call it reform because that's what a lot of people are calling it. There were changes in the license branch system. Substantial, meaningful, Speaker Daly?
Well, I think it is, I don't know that it's substantial, but it is some change, and it all depends. It evidently is perceived to be reform because the media, you folks, have now gotten off of our backs about it. So evidently, most of the people in the media believe that this is a change that is meaningful and at least ought to have a chance to try to work. And I think we all view it as such.
Senator McCarty, you've been campaigning. Matter of fact, some people say you were elected largely on the license branch issue. You had you ran against a license branch manager, a county chairman in Madison County. Is this a media perception problem, or is this, in fact, been a real problem in Indiana?
Oh, I think it's been a significant problem in Indiana. I think there are problems with the old system, and I think there are problems of credibility with that system, and people have lost confidence in that type of operation. So I think a change was absolutely essential. And what I would say about this legislation is it's a framework, it's a vehicle, and it depends very greatly on how the governor implements it. There is kind of a quiet period here, sort of the quiet before we really see it kick in. The governor makes 4 appointments by July 1 of this year to the commission that will oversee this operation of a new license branch system. By January 1 of '87, they'll identify 10 branches that will be run by the state. Okay, I think there'll be a lot of scrutiny of who the 4 appointments are, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. How serious are the appointments? How independent are those people? And I think there'll be a lot of scrutiny of the first 10 branches. Are they all dogs? Are they all losers? Are they all branches that are losing thousands of dollars and nobody wants? Or will we get a good, true cross-section? So in the first steps that the governor takes and the Bureau of Motor Vehicles takes in implementing this, we'll see some signals about how serious we are about a true reform system.
Well, I think we should be much more positive than Bill seems to feel, because I think there is no question that the governor feels very strongly that the system should be changed. And so I believe that you will see 4 good appointments, and I think that the 10 pilot programs will take into consideration small counties, medium-sized counties, large counties, and all kinds of activities. And maybe the best part of this whole thing is that as a result of the pilot programs, when people actually know what the license branch system does do, then I am hoping that we will come to a true bidding system, so that if the newspapers in Muncie want to run the license branch, they can bid for it. Or if a bank wants to, or if an insurance agency in Anderson wants to bid for that, then they have an opportunity to do. And that's one of the ways in which we can privatize the system, because I think some of us believe that the private sector always do a better job than the public sector.
Representative Goodall, was this a Democratic issue that Republicans were able to handle effectively?
Well, it remains to be seen. The jury is still out. My perception of what happened in the license branch system, there were a few committed legislators and other people who wanted to see the change and felt strongly about it. I still feel the basic political people in both political parties favored that system. And I look for the change to be the minimum that will be acceptable to the public and still retain some semblance of control by the 2 political parties in the state. That's my own honest observation.
I just wanted to indicate that I'm not pessimistic. I'm basically saying, show me. Show by good faith actions that we're serious about this reform. It was, I think that Democrats performed a very responsible role in this issue in this session, and that was the loyal opposition that argued for reform. And when the best possibility for reform that was going to come along was apparent this session, that the Democrats worked to write a piece of legislation that was as effective, was as good as it could be, and said, we enter this in good faith. We as Democrats are interested in this reform, and we in good faith enter this effort, in a bipartisan effort, with the governor and with the majority party. Now show us that we're all going forward in good faith.
I agree that it was bipartisan, and I agree with that totally. I think it was totally bipartisan. We'd have never been able to get the votes if it had not been bipartisan. And I think in the Senate and the House, the vote was overwhelming, something like 82 to 8 to 80 to 20 in the House, and I don't know what it was in the Senate.
37 to 12.
So it was overwhelming. So I think everybody wants to, maybe some people were a little reluctant to do it, but it's moving.
Another high-profile issue, the lottery, I guess took its first step, perhaps. The media was blamed for engineering this one, too. In fact, are we on our way to a lottery in the state of Indiana?
Well, sure, we took the first step toward that.
We've done that before, too.
Well, the people will have a chance to make that decision, I think, now.
We're going to see it then again in 87?
Sure.
It's going to pass in 87?
I suspect so. I think it's on a roll. I think it will pass, and I think in the spring of 88, I think the people will have a chance by referendum to determine if they want to amend the Constitution. Then, if that should be approved, then the real issue will be, what will the legislature, in a very positive way, enact to create? Because what we're doing now is only repealing the Constitution that prohibits.
You're opening the door.
So the earliest that we can take a look of anything that will create legalized gambling being sponsored by the state of Indiana will be in the session of 89. And then you'll have all kinds of bills and suggestions, I suspect. Lottery will be one. Parimutuel betting will be two. Certainly some kind of bingo. I don't know what else, but we probably could see casinos, dog racing, and
come on,
highlight.
Highlight. Well, I don't know about that, but
yeah,
we'll just have to see what the legislature, what the pressure is then to create, and how we want to get Indiana involved in promoting and sponsoring legalized gambling.
Senator McCarty, are we just providing more recreation for Hoosiers, or are we providing some meaningful source of revenue?
Well, it's a good question. And a point that must be made on this lottery issue is, for those people who look at it as soft to fiscal problems in the short run, that's just not realistic. The earliest that you would see revenues coming to the state or to any unit of government, whatever the system, would be about 1990. Your first inflow of any revenues, if this was approved, there were no hitches, and it went all the way through, you're talking about money in 1990. So we still have to deal with what this state does in the last 5 years of this decade, and we have to deal with it in terms of existing revenues and expenditures. So it's not a solution to Indiana's financing problems. By 1990, if people want it, it will help, but it's not solving things in the next 5 years. I do say that the momentum for it will get greater and greater because of the Graham-Rudman cuts and other the shortage of revenues at the state level currently. You know, as we get tighter and tighter, you'll get more momentum for a new source of money, and a new source of money that people enter into voluntarily. Now, there aren't very many that we have people enter into voluntarily. And if we get a chance to avoid taxes and do something that people want to do, and it generates money, I think the temptation is very strong for legislators to go that way.
Representative Goodall, did this not present a dilemma for a number of legislators who did not see gambling as good public policy but had trouble resisting the urgings of their constituents to approve this resolution?
Oh, absolutely. I think I described it as a train coming down the track 100 miles an hour, and you better get out of the way. That's about the way the lottery issue came on to the legislators. I talked to, well, for instance, my minister told me, said, Hurley, you shouldn't be for that, it's for gambling. But all the members in the church told me to vote for it. So there's more members than there are preachers, so the members won.
Speaker Daley, you've criticized it as being not good public policy. You haven't changed your position?
I don't change my position. I think you have to question the integrity of any state that has a policy that they prosper only when their citizens lose. And I quote that essentially out of context of something that your paper printed. So I think that's the best summation of the issue.
Somebody mentioned Graham Rudman, and Senator McCarty, was you, that in fact as the federal funds tend to dry up, stop flowing into Indiana in whatever numbers they did before, the state has some real, perhaps some problems. Are we prepared to, I guess, meet the consequences of Graham Rudman?
Well, I think we better be prepared. I mean, I think as legislators, it's our responsibility to meet it. And I think in terms of this election year, one of the discussions or debates that should occur is what are our priorities? Where do we want money? Where do we want to spend money? And if there are programs to be eliminated, what programs get eliminated? I don't think that we pick up every federal program and carry it, that the state has to just automatically assume those and take them. But there are some of those programs that are going to have to continue to operate at some level, and we're going to have the funds for them. This first fiscal year of the state's operation, the drop in federal revenues because of Graham Rudman will be about 40 to 50 million. Second year of the budget will be about 250 million. That particularly that second year, that's a substantial drop in federal revenues, $250 million. That means a lot of choices, a lot of priority choices about what you want to do and what you don't want to do at the state level. And that's the legislator's job.
Is our tax structure adequate at this point, Speaker Daley, to handle this?
Well, it depends on what you mean by handle. If you mean what a lot of people think, that we should pick up and pay for by the state everything that the feds are not going to pay for, then no, we're not, because so far into only a few months into this current biennium, we are already $50 million short of what we predicted that we would be. So the economic activity of this state is such that we're not generating the income we thought we would. So we're already short from that standpoint. And we don't have adequate income to pick up 50 million this year and 250 million the next year. No, not at all.
Are we going to be looking at perhaps a tax increase? Is it inevitable?
Not in my opinion. I think now is the time to make hard decisions as to priorities. You know, most of the programs, not all, of the programs involved in the Graham Rudman cuts have only been around for the 20 years since 1965. They were never in existence prior to that, most of them. And the question I think we as legislators have to ask ourselves, has the quality of life been improved by the spending of all that money? And should we continue it?
Are we talking about the Great Society, LBJ's?
That's right. That's precisely
reform?
What we're talking about.
Are not social programs, Representative Goodall, the ones that are really going to feel the pinch here?
Yeah, they seem to have the least effective constituency for them being continued in the political system. The people with the least amount of clout usually lose out. But I think we also have another tremendous problem, and that's the problem of education and funding it in the state of Indiana. There's a lot of pressure being exerted to increase funding for education, both at the secondary and the higher ed level in the state of Indiana. And I do think we're going to be faced with some hard choices as far as taxes and other things in the next few years.
Yeah, I think there's some traditional areas that we've got to make decisions about. And there are social service programs, but the education issue, if we're going to make any advances in education, we'll have to deal with the shortfall of revenues. What are we going to do about it? And the other one, the traditional one that I would point out, is road construction. Under Graham Rudman, in the second year of the biennium, there is a reduction of over $60 million in federal funds for highway construction. That's a real traditional area and one that the state has traditionally been seen responsible for. Indiana, 2 years ago, passed a gas tax increase, diesel fuel increase, that generated new monies, but the subtraction of the federal monies just about washes that out, makes it an equal. What we added in is being lost through Graham Rudman. So There are some decisions about highway construction and what we want to do in that area. Some tough choices to be made.
While we're talking about education, Larry, we're the only nation in the world that only requires our public school children to go to school 175 days a year. Japan, it's 220. And almost every other nation in the world requires children to go to school more time. And I don't think anybody could really argue about the fact that if children are exposed to more time at their books, they will learn more. And they will be better equipped to meet life when they get out. And we simply, we're the tail end of how long we require our children to go to school.
That's state policy, isn't it? I mean, you set that state to state. Indiana has full control over that?
Certainly.
And if we want to move that direction, we can. But if you're
That's
talking
right.
about longer time in school, you're talking about paying teachers more money and
That is
maintaining
true.
more facilities.
That is true.
And that's significant.
Not
sums of money.
facilities.
Well, you're paying maintenance people. All I'm saying is you're maintaining the building much longer, using
True.
utilities, et cetera.
True.
So you're talking about...
If we do that, of course it will cost more money. Every day costs more money.
Right.
We spend over, I'd say, including local funds, we spend $2 billion a year in Indiana for education. Here in Muncie, the average school teacher takes home $24,000, and when you add all the fringes to that, it makes it about $30,000 that it costs taxpayers. Now, we will begin to see that will cost substantially more if we get into longer school years.
Are we prepared to spend significant sums of new money here?
Well, that depends on what the taxpayers really want to do.
They'll let you know.
I'm sure they will.
We've talked about some of the high-profile issues I mentioned, the license branch lottery, some of the spending. What are some of the things that came out of this 86 session that didn't get all the publicity that you think were particularly significant?
Well, as a general theme, I would throw in, and I mean, actually it was high profile, but we haven't mentioned it, and that is this issue of liability coverage, the costs of insurance, and the dispute of how the legal system, whether that is accelerated by the legal system or not. And that will be an ongoing dispute. I think we'll see 3 or 4 good years of debate about that, which will, I think, run its course with some reforms, some changes that occurred this time, and will also run its course because I think insurance companies will make those adjustments in their own system of marketing to handle the costs of insurance underwriting.
Did we do much in this session other than call attention to the problem, though?
Well, oh yeah.
You think this
legislation...
Yes, I think so too.
As a result of what we did do, which was not great, the plaintiffs' trial lawyers of Indiana have filed 15 candidates against current incumbents, trying to get them beat because of the position they took voting against those lawyers and their fees. And we're going to see that become extremely high profile.
So you've encouraged participation in the political process here, is that what you're saying?
Well, I suppose so. But I know that the trial lawyers of Indiana have declared Bob Daley public enemy number 1, they say so publicly, and John Mutz, the lieutenant governor, public enemy number 2, because of our position in trying to change the civil justice system, the manner in which we can help protect cities and counties and school corporations and all kinds of people.
But this legislation was pretty much a first step. I mean, it was not
It
really
was a first step, that's right.
It was not really a gigantic step.
Well, you had frivolous lawsuits. The losing party will have to pay the legal costs of the winning party in a frivolous lawsuit. You got a modification in the collateral source rule that allows more information to be given to a jury in awarding damages in personal injury cases. Quite complicated new mechanism, and it's going to take a few years to see how well it works and how well it washes out. Limitation of liability of board members of not-for-profit corporation. Limitation on liability of volunteer firemen. So there's 4. I think there may be 1 or 2 others. 4 or 5 little pieces of legislation that will adjust the system and fine-tune it. And I think that's better than going in with a great big broad steamroller and knocking everybody down.
I think it was much more major than being little legislation. I think the people, the legal profession, see it as a major issue. Otherwise, some of them would not be yelling. Now, there are some other things. I think the corporate code that we had not changed in Indiana since the 1920s. We did change in a material way, and I understand the courts have declared it to be unconstitutional, and so it'll go through the court system, in which we tried to protect against hostile takeover some of the major Indiana corporations. You know, we have so few native Hoosier corporations. We ought to protect what we have. So we did try to do that, and I think that was major legislation, unheralded to an extent.
Any other benchmarks?
I think they've covered the major ones. You know, there were, for me, the recognition of Dr. King's birthday as a state holiday. It was certainly significant, and I want to publicly thank the Speaker for the role that he played in that.
Well, did you guys leave something to do for 1987?
Oh, lots.
What's going to be the issue in 87? Is the budget going to overshadow everything?
Always does.
Except the lottery, perhaps? There'll be a lot of...
No, I would say financial, fiscal issues will be the dominant issue of 87, no question about it, and arguments about how to spend the limited dollars that are available. I would say that's it. Then you'll have lottery, you'll have some arguments still about license branch, and you'll have plenty of other issues. This liability issue will continue. So there'll be plenty to operate with. I think you're going to see more and more of the issues of hazardous waste and waste disposal, and some of the experiences nationally and internationally. People's awareness of that issue is going to just grow and grow and grow.
Something to look forward to. We're out of time today. Thanks to our panelists, Representative Hurley Goodall, House Speaker J. Roberts Daley, and Senator William McCarty. I'm Larry Law. Thank you for joining us today.
If you have comments regarding this program, please address them to John Rouse, Box 149, Muncie, Indiana 47305. The producer for Public Affairs Roundtable is John Rouse. Associate producers are Cecil Bohannon and Bill Mosier. This program is a production of University Media Services, the Department of Political Science, and radio and television stations on the campus of Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana.